We've got a lot of tougher laws in place right across the board in terms of social distancing and so on, and you've got some information in terms of how many infringement notices have been issued.
Yes, that's right, and this is quite interesting in terms of the concerns people have on their civil liberties at the moment, Kieran. I can reveal that police have issued 30 infringement notices so far in relation to people breaking these rules not to leave home and so forth. These numbers actually start from the 17th of March when restrictions started to get into place. The latest infringement, a $5,000 infringement notice under the Public Health Act on a remedial massage business in Cardiff. Not much social distancing going on there. Several customers entering and leaving the premises. So since that 17th of March, police have issued 2 court attendance notices for breaching the Public Health Act. Crime Stoppers have received 3,200 reports, so lots of people dobbing in others for not doing the right thing. And police have conducted more than 3,900 compliance checks across New South Wales. Importantly here, Kieran, in this police statement it says that Mick Fuller, the Police Commissioner, will personally review every penalty infringement notice issued in relation to alleged breaches of public health orders to ensure the issuing of such infringements is the most appropriate course of action. So there's almost a reassurance there from the New South Wales Police Commissioner that they won't go over the top with these powers, including 6 months jail for people who are outside other than for the, quote, reasonable excuse, unquote. The point is to have the tough laws in place to make sure people do the right thing, almost as a kind of deterrent. But we've seen those pictures from our Sky News cameraman before about how much they're doing in terms of warnings, at least.
The other big story that is continuing are these ships, the cruise ships off the coast. You've got WA, Fremantle, 5 off the New South Wales coast. And we've had some strong language today, Andrew, from both the Home Affairs Minister and his opposite number, Christina Keneally. Talk us through where that story's at, because we've been covering the childcare issue, but this cruise story continues to be a big one.
But because all of those passengers and crew that are in these sort of voyages of the damned off the Australian shores, if they all just flooded in, that could flood our ICU beds, and it would effectively mean that all the hard work we've been doing, staying at home and social distancing, could be ruined. That's the concern of particularly the New South Wales Police Commissioner, Mick Fuller. That's why he's trying to see them off, and that's why the federal authorities too are trying to see countries take their own citizens. But with several of these cruise ships still off the coast, the Ruby Princess saga looks to have a way to go. We've got now 7 deaths from this ship and about 10% of cases from this ship. And we're going to show you some footage now of police, I believe, today boarding the Ruby Princess saga to do some testing with the crew. Now, New South Wales and federal government sources have confirmed to me concerns about information the Ruby Princess crew gave to authorities before the ship was allowed to dock in Sydney on March 19. It's been put to me there is documentation which was provided to the Commonwealth, signed off by the ship's doctor, stating that no passengers had COVID-related symptoms when it was allowed to dock. The documents did state that there were ill passengers, some with fever, but it was clearly signed as saying no COVID passengers. I'm also aware that there are tapes, recordings, involving conversations between the ship's captain and the New South Wales Ports Authority discussing the coronavirus issue that the state government is now examining. Now, New South Wales Health were apparently working off this Australian Border Force document filled out by the ship's doctor when it's made its decision to let them in, and made that decision with isolation guarantees, but perhaps less wary because it had come from New Zealand. There's no doubt at all that New South Wales Health have stuffed up a bit here and should have been more vigilant, but there are suggestions around the place that Carnival Australia could have done more too. Well, separately to that, Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton, he went on 2GB this morning accusing the cruise ships of lying about passengers on their ships and their health. Let's have a listen.
Some of these ships will move off and go back to their port of origin. Some of them we may be able to extract the crew and fly them back to their country of origin. Some of them, because they've been out there for more than 14 days, there's no presence of COVID-19 on board. Others we do have a concern about, but it's clear that some of the companies have been lying about the situation of the health of passengers and crew on board. So what we've agreed to do with New South Wales is to look at each of the vessels. I need to get an honest picture of what's happening.
Now, why the reluctance to help people in need on cruise ships and to have them repatriated to their own countries? Have a look at this chart again. I want to show you this again. We showed this yesterday. It's the pie chart of to Australia. Top left, Europe. Bottom right, Americas. Most of the cases from there. Southeast Asia, we had the China travel ban. Australian citizens coming from China and they self-isolated. So China's not a big chunk. At sea, look at that. Just extraordinary. The number of cases, it's not just the 10% from the Ruby Princess. In terms of cases from overseas, which are, a significant number of the cases, that looks like about a quarter. So as I understand it, work's going on with New South Wales and federal authorities to gradually repatriate as many passengers as possible off these cruise ships off the coast. Just like with the Diamond Princess in Japan, where Australian citizens were taken off and then quarantined. In WA, sources have told us the Artania off the coast is said to be riddled with coronavirus, and the WA government wants the federal government to effectively push the ship away. Still waiting developments on that. We are flattening the curve in Australia on COVID-19, but the cruise ships are a big risk. That's definitely been put to me. Anyway, Christina Keneally, the opposition Home Affairs spokeswoman's weighed in today and criticised the government for not doing enough on the borders and cruise ships. Have a listen.
On the 15th of March, the Prime Minister stood before the nation and said that the federal government would not allow cruise ships to arrive. 4 days later, the Ruby Princess arrived. It disembarked 2,700 passengers, and those passengers have unknowingly spread the coronavirus right across Australia. Now, we welcome these border measures that have come in very recent days, but they have come too late. They have come too late. And more astoundingly, the Commonwealth government, which is responsible for our borders at the ports and at the airports, has handballed the responsibility for quarantine measures to state governments.
All right, let's have a look at the statement from Carnival Australia to what I said earlier in terms of them perhaps needing to take some responsibility for Ruby Princess. They say Ruby Princess adhered to all federal and state health clearance procedures and systems. The medical team fully disclosed New South Wales Health. There were some people on board with flu-like symptoms. And at the time, cruise ships around the world did not do on-board COVID-19 tests on board. They provided swabs to public health authorities who did the testing. That happened in Ruby Princess's arrival March 19. New South Wales Health asked for swabs and the ship provided them. New South Wales Health was fully aware there were people on board with flu-like symptoms and they'd made a full declaration on that. They say New South Wales Health told the ship that had been assessed. The Ruby Princess determined it did not require on-board health assessment, and the advice also stated to the ship that it was free to disembark tomorrow, subject to the need for passengers to do 14 days self-isolation. Well, we know many just flew straight across the country, and that's how this thing spread, Kieran. Now, also just want to show you quickly this the statement or comments by Stir Mimal. He says he's been unfairly treated because the Pacific Explorer was forced to leave Australia.
There is no illness on Pacific Explorer. No passenger or crew member has at any point tested positive for COVID-19. Yet today, the New South Wales Police instructed Pacific Explorer to leave Sydney Harbour, the ship's home port. It is unprecedented for Australia's homegrown cruise line to be ordered to leave Australia. It is bitterly disappointing that short-term responses have put an industry, jobs and people at risk.
So from one area of this crisis to another, I want to ask you, Andrew, about what's happening on rental issues. When does the National Cabinet meet to address those concerns? Because obviously both at a business tenancy and a residential tenancy, this remains an issue that needs to be managed.
Such an important issue to a lot of people, isn't it, Kieran? So National Cabinet meets tomorrow with the handling of landlords and distressed commercial renters on the agenda. As it's been put to me, there will be uniform proposals to assist landlords, not evict tenants, commercial landlords, not evict tenants who've had to shut down their businesses, and potentially some moves to help residential landlords as well. It's been suggested to me one proposal on the table is for quick relief panels to replace the current slower rental tribunal to protect landlords when renters can't pay their rent and there is a dispute. This will ensure tenants cannot stay in a dwelling without paying if they're in distressed circumstances and trash the joint. The PM has already announced breaks for distressed commercial tenants, but the states have been asked to come up with a package of compensation for those landlords. Land tax relief at the top of the list, basically a waiver on land tax, I understand. Further subsidies for landlords have been considered when a commercial renter has effectively shut down. But there's one thing the states will ask the Prime Minister to drop or water down. As I understand it, Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria want this clause dropped that the Prime Minister announced the other day, Kieran, that tenants will have the ability to terminate leases and or seek mediation or conciliation on the grounds of financial distress. This, it is argued, could reduce the valuation of shopping centres drastically and cause their collapse. So as the government continues with its range of compensation packages everywhere from childcare to rents to wage subsidies, it creates its own difficulties in terms of the running of the economy. Such a difficult series of issues the federal government in particular and also the states are having to deal with at the moment.
Andrew, just finally before you go, give us your take on the suggestion that Australia is going to be more like Germany and how Germany responded to this virus in terms of the way that the health system's been able to manage than, say, those like Italy or Spain.
Yeah, I know everyone's doing it tough at the moment. We often talk about this, Kieran, but there is method behind the madness here. Look, Germany, the hope is to be more like Germany than Italy. I mean, you've all seen the pictures from Italy, right? So Germany have had 78,000 cases, but a mortality rate of just 1%. 1% of those have died. Italy, 110,000 identified cases and 12% of deaths. So significantly too, the average age of coronavirus victims in Germany is 46 compared to Italy's 63. What this shows is how widespread testing is. Italy's in such a bad state, they're only testing people who've got really bad symptoms, it seems. We are going to get tens of thousands of cases of COVID-19 in Australia. There's no sugarcoating that. But we are trying to have that over several months as opposed to 3 or 4 weeks to keep the weight off the health system. That's what we're trying to achieve here. Like Germany, we've done a ton of tests, and that means we can contact trace and then isolate people to stop the spread. That, together with the draconian social distancing measures and temporary business closures, is expected to help us. Perhaps if we can have a look at the graphic of the curve here, flattening the curve, where we're at the moment, how the cases aren't increasing so drastically. It means at the moment what's happened is the states have backed away from the proposal to shut retail stores. That was really on the cards, Kieran, a couple of days ago. There's no plan to do that now, and that's good news for the economy. That's what Scott Morrison wants. But as someone said to me this morning, things are being monitored daily. They are currently under control. We know with this virus from the experience in other countries that things can get out of control almost overnight. That is why authorities are staying vigilant on the cruise ship issue. One area of interest we spoke about yesterday, end of April, a surge according to the Commonwealth modelling. Commonwealth Government not prepared to release that modelling. Let's hear what Opposition Health spokesman Chris Bowen said about that earlier.
There is various modelling out there that's done by experts like Rainer McIntyre and others. If the government disagrees with that modelling, it would be better that they release as much information as possible about their own modelling. They said they would. If we want the Australian people to trust governments, governments have to trust the Australian people. And that includes providing as much information as possible.